so much for being my show, Professor. It has been almost 2 years since our last interview. In the last few years, China's economic structure continued to improve, reform and opening up continued to deepen. So as a scholar living in China, what's your experience and observation on this?
Overall, we're seeing a return to health. China has, even over the course of the pandemic, but certainly accelerating thereafter, remained fundamentally committed to opening up. Now, historically, this was oriented towards driving export-led growth, and certainly China is still interested in exporting, but it's also interested in importing. It's also interested in having a more open economy in order to make the Chinese economy itself more competitive and efficient, both domestically, but likewise in the global arena.
I know you have been teaching in China, specializing in political science, and recently the third plenary session of the 20th Central Committee of the CPC has concluded successfully. So, as a scholar, what aspect of this session that you pay more attention to?
When we have these big meetings, what you're really seeing is the politics of consensus. It's been very, very difficult for China to reach that consensus with regard to deep reforms. We've always had reforms in China in the new era. We've always had them in new China, but we have struggled in the past 15 to 20 to 25 years to really push down and resolve some of those deep structural needs that had become entrenched in the Chinese economy during the high growth period. And so now, what we see with this third plenum is the realization that finally these things must be dealt with. They must be dealt with as a national security reason. They must be dealt with in order to ensure that China remains competitive economically in the era of great power competition. That requires a whole new type of thinking and production model if you want to be the best in that new era.
Well, we noticed that the word reform appeared for 53 times in the communique. So further deepen reform comprehensively is for sure the focus of this session. So in what area do you expect to see wider opening up and deeper reform in China in the future?
Well, the thing is that we saw more than 300 areas that the various third plenum documents pointed out needed reforms. So I would expect that, given those 300 areas which touch on nearly all walks of life in China, in other words, reform is going to touch everything in terms of the third plenum document, is that it stipulates that this reform work on these key areas, which will include things like the property market, which will include things like local debt and financial stress on small and medium-sized financial institutions, among many other. Chinese development has reached a level now where opening up is going to drive reform.
Well, we noticed that you are quite insightful towards the result of China's sustainable development. So, Professor, what momentum do you think this session gonna bring to China's future sustainable development?
Well, when we talk about sustainable development, we often emphasize two key points. The first is, you need to be able to invest in projects, whether it's infrastructure or industry or new technologies. You need to be able to invest in things that will be able to create long-term growth, not something where we're just going to throw some stimulus money at an issue, but also secondly, an economy that is ecologically responsible. So this is where we see the emphasis on green innovation and green development, making sure that as we are developing new economic projects. For example, I was in Sichuan recently, and one of the things that surprised me was that they had created a substantial caviar industry in that area, one that hadn't existed there before, one that was coming from or using beluga sturgeon. Now, what that means is they have to build a local environment that can support those fish but also ensure that that industry in turn doesn't have a negative impact on the broader environment, which is also has other specialized products, certainly values for local ecological well-being. So this is these are the two sides of sustainable development that are most commonly emphasized, and certainly these are things that the third plenum had in mind, issues like this.
Okay, Professor, my last question for you. Currently, China is developing new quality productive forces tailored to local conditions. So, what's your understanding on new quality productive forces? And how do you see the significance and keys of developing and cultivating this kind of forces?
Let's give a few examples before we expand the theoretical discussion. You know, there are other examples of new quality productive forces. For example, green technology, renewable energy products, solar panels, as well as wind turbines, and certainly China's incredible advances in EV production, battery production, and I think we've already seen some exciting developments in China's ability to produce computer chips that will continue to score significant results given the amount of attention and investment that's being paid to that issue. But you know, as China is transitioning to meet the challenges associated with the emerging fourth industrial revolution, and as it's doing so while facing great power competition from the United States, which includes tech decoupling efforts instigated by the U.S. And finally, while it also needs to bring great abilities and technology, what we see is the need to focus especially on new quality productive forces in order to drive these various needs for progress forward. This is a matter of economic as well as national security.
Thank you so much for sharing, sir.
Thank you.